Good afternoon. I'm Jessica Boudreau, as she said, Ashley Wagaspack, and we're both pediatric OTs. We have both been certified in sensory integration, so we have a lot of experience working with these children. And as pediatric OTs, we use the sensory integration frame of reference daily in our practice. And today we hope to give you tips that will help your child function better at home, at school, and even when you are out in the community. So what is sensory integration? It's the normal neurological process of organizing sensations for use in everyday life. We use sensations to survive, to learn, and to function smoothly. We're all constantly processing sensory input from our body and from the outside world, and it's something that we all do. Everyone in this room is constantly processing this information. So do we only have 5 senses? We have vision, hearing, smell, taste, and those are the common ones that you always hear about. But there's also the touch, which we call the tactile system, vestibular, and the proprioceptive system. So these hidden senses, often not discussed, are very important to our overall sensory processing. So your tactile system is going to tell you whether you're actively touching something or passively being touched. And it helps us to identify between threatening and non-threatening touch sensations. So for example, right now you're feeling your seat, your chair. You can feel your clothes on your body. You might have had an annoying tag when you first put on your shirt, but maybe now you aren't even aware of it anymore. The vestibular sense provides information related to gravity and space, balance and movement, and your head and body position in relation to the earth. Right now you're sitting upright in your chair, your head's at midline, and that's all related to your vestibular system. And your proprioceptive sense is providing information through your joints, muscles, and ligaments about where your body parts are and what they're doing. So without looking down, you can tell if your legs are crossed. You can tell if you're sitting on your legs. You have that awareness of where your body is. Sorry. Okay, so optimal sensory integration. If we say, Johnny, please sit still in your seat. Johnny is focusing and hearing what's being said. He has to screen out other information related to the auditory and the visual system. So for example, maybe the air conditioner is on when you're speaking to Johnny. Maybe his classmate next to him is wiggling around. So he has to be able to focus and ignore that information. Also having the muscle sense, thank you, and the joint position, so proprioceptive system and the tactile system to know where his body is in relation to the desk. Is he sitting in the desk? Is he sitting halfway on the desk? And also the core strength and the balance to be able to hold up his posture and to sit upright.
All right, so now I'm going to talk about what it looks like when the sensory processing is not happening as efficiently as it should. So as an occupational therapist, we would consider this dysfunction of sensory integration. So what does it look like? What's the definition? So when your brain is not efficiently processing the information from your body and the environment. So you're bothered by sounds, you're bothered by touch sensations, you don't like to get your fingernails cut, you're screaming when you get your hair cut, you have to have, certain clothing that has to fit a certain way. You're really sensitive to movement, you get car sick frequently, or you're a sensory seeker and you're seeking an abundance amount of movement. And it's just an inefficient way that we interpret what we're getting from our bodies. We also know that there hasn't been a whole lot of research specifically in reference to sensory integration with PWS individuals, but we know that all of the types of activities that we're going to give you today to do with your children, it promotes good development for anybody. So there hasn't been a whole lot of research, and with sensory integration in general, there's been lots of research that's been done recently by Lucy Jane Miller to try and get the diagnostic manual to include sensory integration. And it's just a hard group of kids in general to study and try to get some hardcore research on, because they're not a homogeneous group. Everyone presents differently. And so it's been difficult to kind of prove this. So sometimes we'll struggle from insurance standpoint. That's kind of like a red flag when they see the word sensory integration. They'll oftentimes give us some trouble whenever we're trying to get this type of therapy approved. But it's been very beneficial for all of the children we work with. So one of the things we're going to discuss today is the concept of praxis. And again, this is something that you and we do. It's a unique human skill. It's not in the animal, mammal, species. It's unique to humans. It's the way that we interact with the physical world. It's the way that our brain is able to conceive, organize, and carry out a sequence of unfamiliar activities. And it is critical when we are learning a new skill. So this is what a clinical picture of a child with dyspraxia, which is basically when there's dysfunction of praxis. So we'll oftentimes see clumsiness, disorganization. It takes a longer time for a child to learn a new motor skill. The child could get easily frustrated, which could then end up leading to lower self-esteem because of the struggles that it takes to learn that new skill. And then they don't have a good concept of how to actually execute that new motor skill. So would you say that in your experience with your own children, do you feel like this is something, these things are something that you've maybe witnessed with your own children with PWS? Because I see this classically with the children that we work with, that these are areas that we that are really impacting across the board from a very young age. So, some intervention approaches for learning that we implement as therapists and educate families on. The first one is from a bottom-up approach. And so as occupational therapists, we rely heavily on this approach from a sensory integration standpoint. Basically, what that approach is that we're feeding the body with really intense sensory opportunities to help the child have a better idea of where their body is in space from a proprioceptive standpoint. We provide them with movement opportunities from a vestibular standpoint, lots of sensory rich tactile experiences from a touch standpoint. And then there's also the top-down approach, which we find as the child gets older, we're able to use more cognitive aspects to help with the child learning the new skill. So, how does arousal and internal rhythm help with improving your praxis? So this is kind of the baseline where all learning begins. It's ground zero. When we have a child that walks into the door with PWS or another developmental delay of some sort, this is really where we have to start in order for any learning to happen from there. It teaches, when you have internal rhythm, when you have good arousal, you're able to learn from there. So if you are overtired or if you are overly aroused because of input you're getting from your body that's very dysregulating, it's going to be very hard for you to learn. This room, I find, is getting warmer, so that might be putting us, as after lunch, into a low arousal, and so it may be that much harder for you to attend to this presentation. I'm just giving it as an example. As the big pregnant person, I'll start sweating shortly. But we do have to be aware of our arousal, the child's arousal level, their internal rhythm, so that that their environment is not chaotic, because no one, you or I, we cannot learn in a chaotic environment. And we know our children with PWS, they struggle from a very baseline standpoint with body awareness. It takes extra work to be able just to sit up in their desk and have good postural control. So if there's a lot of other things going on that are impacting their arousal and their internal rhythm, it's going to be that much harder for them to learn new skills. And don't underestimate. You just do not think that the child can control their behavior if they're at a high activity level or high arousal level. So really pay close attention to this, and we're going to discuss some things that you can do with your child, some strategies from an arousal and rhythm standpoint. And hopefully you're already familiar with some of these things, and it kind of reinforces like, oh, this is a good activity for me to do, and I'll continue to do this. Or maybe we can tweak it in a little way to make it more efficient and effective for our child. So the rocking game, simply the linear vestibular movement of sitting on a swing or in a rocking chair. So you rocking your child, or for an older child, have them hold on to a stuffed animal, and then they can do the active rocking back and forth. That's going to be very supportive of their arousal and internal rhythm. Making a fort game, using pillows and chairs and blankets and covering an area so that the child can get under and be in a sort of closed area to block out maybe extra sound or visual input. That's going to be very supportive for the child. Also, allowing the child to move the heavy pillows or chairs, pushing those things around, that's going to help provide lots of heavy work and proprioceptive input, which is going to be organizing for the child. Breathing games, you can either have, for an older child, get them to do some rhythmical breathing, and they can say, I am calm, like a mantra to help them calm themselves down. Or for the younger child, blowing cotton balls or feathers, blowing bubbles. There's bubble wands to kind of give some tactile input to the child to help them to engage in blowing. We know that the brain is physically unable to stay in a heightened state when engaged in deep breathing. So we're trying to do breathing activities. Blowing is going to be helpful. Anything that's going to help get the breath out of the body is going to be supportive. This is the way. So you know that song, This is the way we wash our hair. So we can put that tune to anything. This is the way we stomp our feet, and we're using that very rhythmical tune to get them to do anything that may be difficult for the child. Stomping their feet, again, is using heavy work, proprioceptive input. That's like the universal modulator. So a low arousal kid, it kind of brings them up. A high arousal kid brings them down. So anytime they're engaged in using their muscles, it's going to be very supportive. We know that giving sensory input to the mouth through oral motor play is very organizing. I mean, you can think for a second all the things that you do, from gum chewing to chewing on your fingernails to whatever, picking, whatever you do that you're putting input into your mouth. Oral activities are a great way to help with organization, arousal, rhythm. So sucking and blowing, chewing, and there's so many things outside of just food that we're talking about. So again, blowing cotton balls, blowing pom-poms, getting a basin of water with something that makes bubbles and putting tubing, and they can blow and see the bubbles overflow and make like a volcano. Those are going to be the kinds of activities. There's all kinds of chew tubes, vibrating, teething toys for the child to put into their mouth that's going to provide this supportive oral input. And then yoga. As adults, we know the benefits of yoga. So for breathing and positioning, helps stretch the muscles and provides heavy work holding the positions and moving in and out of those positions. There's fabulous kids books, ABC books that incorporate different yoga poses. So there's lots out there as far as yoga goes. And then go on a few more strategies regarding developing rhythmicity and your body's ability to sequence, because we don't do motor tasks that are just one step. I mean, whenever we are getting dressed, there's multiple steps involved. Whenever we're feeding, we hold the spoon, we scoop it, and we put it to our mouth. So there's lots involved with the motor tasks that we're learning, lots of sequencing involved. So body rocking on a swing, a therapy ball, lying over a therapy ball. So depending on where your child is posturally, they may not be able to sit up on the ball yet or be able to sit up on a swing, but just them moving back and forth over a ball is going to be very organizing. As they get older, bouncing on a therapy ball, or if you have a one of those little tight bucket swings for your younger children versus just being able to move back and forth, you can rig up bungees so that they can also bounce up and down, and getting some movement in that linear vestibular direction. Jumping on a trampoline up and down, jumping over hoops on the floor or ropes on the floor, something that's going to encourage them to do repetitive jumping. Rhythm sticks, where they're tapping with their hands in a reciprocal way on a therapy ball, on drums, that they're having to do a back and forth tapping motion. That's going to provide proprioceptive input, really organizing auditory input, and then some tactile input from them having to use their hands. Clapping games, pat a cake, as basic as it is, it's very organizing and clapping along to songs as the child gets older for them to be able to stay on beat with the song. And then any kind of crawling activity. We incorporate crawling from the youngest child to our oldest kids. We pull out crash pads and pillows, and having them move their body over, big crash pads or pillows is very, very sensory rich as far as heavy work goes. As the child gets older, you can try to encourage them to crawl with the same arm and leg forward. I mean, as they're younger, of course, reciprocal movements what we're going to be working on. All right, Jess.
Awesome. So now we're going to go into specific sensory strategies. And when you think about what works for your child, I ask you to first think about what works for you. So does anyone want to share possibly what calms them at the end of the day? I mean, for myself, I know a long warm bath is very relaxing. Anyone?
Wine, yeah.
Absolutely. Maybe reading a book in a quiet space, maybe taking a walk, maybe even doing like vacuuming and chores, you might find is very organizing for you, especially if you're kind of stressed and kind of worked up.
I find like doing the dishes is where I process my day.
Yes, and so learning what works for you is helpful, especially when you look at your child, just to kind of understand like yourself first. So when you look at your child, observe them. When are they at their best? Is it when they're playing outside in the dirt? Is it when they're rocking? Is it when they're in a tent, maybe reading a book? So many kids will really, you can watch them and see, okay, like they're in their element. What are they doing? Cue into what system are they targeting? So some calming or organizing activities. Deep pressure is going to almost always be calming to a child. Back rubs, hugs, lotion, rubs, especially incorporating that after bath time possibly. That'll help ease into nighttime routine. Slow, rhythmical, repetitive activities such as rocking, swinging back and forth, rhythmical singing, having the lights low so you can tell, like right now I feel like the lights being dim is great, but if they were very bright and fluorescent, that would be more alerting to us. Also, setting up a quiet getaway spot, like Ashley kind of mentioned, not that is used for a punishment, but just if you see your child is really having a hard time, cueing them to go into that safe space so they can kind of have limited sensory input, kind of have a time to recharge and kind of take a moment for themselves when they're having a rough time. So deep pressure activities, bear hugs, back rubs, body massages, building a sandwich with bean bags, heavy blankets, sofa cushions with your child in the middle. That's one of our favorite activities to do at home. Like I'll squish my little boy and he loves it. And you might see that over time, once your kids realize, oh, that felt good, they'll seek it out on their own. Very often in the clinic, I have many kids who like go find their own little space to hide under because it's so organizing for them. You can also wrap your child tightly in a blanket and then see if they can crawl out. So not only have you given them that deep touch pressure and that good input, but then see if they can actively crawl out and get even more input. When your child's sitting, especially if they're kind of wiggling, you can use a heavy blanket just for a little while, just to kind of give them a little more awareness. Or a weighted sock sometimes can be helpful. And also steamroller with siblings, like if they take turns, carefully and in moderation, but like kind of rolling over each other, just a little rough play that's still safe, but that they can enjoy. Some heavy work activities. So these are kind of related to this classroom setting, like washing desks, helping arrange classrooms, moving books, targeting snacks. So if your child prefers chewy or crunchy foods, kind of using that to your advantage, whatever's in their diet, carrying books, different things. But this can also be at home as simple as pushing laundry baskets back and forth from the house. You might not need them pushed, but if your child can enjoy it and like become calmer from it or just more organized, then it could be to your benefit. Putting waters in the fridge. We love picking up the water bottle, having to put it in the fridge, and that repetitive work back and forth, even unloading groceries. And a simple task as having a turkey baster in the bathtub. So they're squeezing the water and really getting some heavy work through the hands, and also like some strengthening for fine motor skills. These simple things you can kind of incorporate into your day where it's not extra work for you, but it's really helpful for your child. Proprioceptive activities, so providing opportunities for adult work. Pushing, pulling, digging are great for your child. You might have noticed that your child might enjoy, like, take out a wagon. Well, they love to pull the wagon or push the wagon. Being outside in the yard, like letting your child as much as they can participate in some of that adult work is going to be so beneficial. Tug of war. And I have weighted vest or belt. You have to use caution because obviously children with low tone, you don't want to cause any difficulties. But even a tight compression shirt, and I say compression shirt, like a dry fit or just a fitted shirt sometimes, even like a turtleneck can be calming and just give enough extra deep pressure to a child that's safe but that they could find helpful. Some vestibular activities, so swings are the most popular form, as we discussed. Rocking chairs, gliders, horses are all calming. Scooter boards, we talked about yesterday. Being on a scooter board is going to be strengthening for the upper body, but also good that the child can pull themselves back and forth and get that vestibular input. Also spinning, we don't use it a ton in the clinic, like spin round and round and round and round, but like just using it in moderation. So if you see your child is having like kind of tired, just need some arousing input, just if they're on a swing or just kind of spinning every now and then. And you might see that your child enjoys that activity on their own. They might seek it out, but that's going to be more alerting than the slow motion of linear going back and forth.
And then some additional strategies for the school-age child, some heavy work proprioceptive activities that you can do in the classroom, like we've mentioned, but we'll repeat, is carrying books around, pushing chairs, opening doors for other kids or other friends in the area, wearing a heavy backpack, again, being mindful that some children are experiencing scoliosis or that's something that's being monitored. And so, we don't want hours of them wearing something heavy on their back, but putting, a little Ziploc bag of beans or rice in a heavy, in a backpack to kind of weigh it down to provide unilateral, not unilateral, bilateral. We're looking for input equally through their body to send some good, rich input down their spine to give some heavy work. Moving a trash can to another location, squeeze balls or fidgets. I mean, the internet is loaded with different suggestions of different kinds of squeeze balls and fidgets that are out there. And it just kind of depends on the age of your child, what's safe and appropriate, and what helps. So if you give your child something and they're throwing it around or putting it in their mouth, you may need to give repetition an opportunity to kind of wear off some of the novelty. But if it's working, you will know. If it's not, if it's a school-age child and they continue to be disruptive with it, then it's probably not the targeted tool that you're going to use for your child. Some additional strategies from a movement standpoint. Again, rocking chairs. If your child has decent enough balance and can stand on one of those tilt boards, that can be a way to get some movement in during the day. Sitting on an air cushion, there's little move and sit cushions or sit discs that the child can sit underneath. For the youngest child to the oldest individual, by them having that movement underneath them, it allows them to focus longer and to stay in tuned. And then also, if your child tends to kind of become inattentive, that movement actually helps kind of keep their arousal up and focused. Help the teacher to hand out papers. So, I mean, I know, having close contact with your teacher and giving them some of these suggestions would be supportive for the child. Push their feet on TheraBand or other kinds of cording or bands that you can put on the legs of the chair for them to constantly push down, so that resistive movement is going to be very calming and organizing. Take a stretch break, so just getting up from your chair and allowing the child to do, and this can benefit everyone in the classroom. And again, deep breathing, that's going to be very supportive of the child, and again, every kid in his or her class. So we found that yesterday the exchange between the parents was so enlightening and helpful, and I think everyone enjoyed. So we'd like to ask questions if you have questions of us, and for you to share your sensory, little tips that you find that helps your child. So does anyone have any questions?
I have a question actually. So my daughter's 2, and we're in OT right now. And I don't have anything like specific that I'm like, oh, that's a sensory struggle. How do you know when it's just like normal 2-year-old, like she doesn't love having her hair brushed, but she has hardly any hair, so she hardly ever gets her hair brushed. Right, so is that normal 2-year-old behavior? Is that a sensory problem? How do you distinguish between the two?
Well, typically one behavior in isolation is not something that we become alarmed about. It's typically like accumulation of several things. And at the end of the day, it's when it impacts function. So, I mean, we all have our quirks and our peculiar behaviors and things that we can tolerate and things that we don't do well with. But if we function and we get through our day smoothly and we're not, crawling under a desk for a reprieve, then we just go with it, So we're not looking to pick our children apart so much and go, okay, is this behavior? Is this sensory? Is this just normal development? Look, our kids are smart. They learn from a very, very young age how to survive. And as parents, we learn how to help them survive. So I get that question all the time. Is it sensory or is it behavior? Well, past probably about 6 months, definitely by a year, it's probably both. And that shows me that your child is bright enough and you've been attuned enough to help your child get through their day. So it is going to be, a combination of things. But if you're able to get through morning routine, get the child dressed, get breakfast accomplished, get in the car, get to work on time, get your child where they need to get, they function smoothly throughout the day without multiple tantrums or difficulties that the teacher or the daycare worker or you're struggling with. They get home, they're able to get through the evening routine, get to bed without a 2-hour routine where it takes forever. They sleep decent through the night, on average. I mean, that's pretty much what we're looking for, again, everybody's going to have their off days, and when days are going to be rougher than others, when we're more stressed as parents, our children will feel that, and so we may see some of their sensory sensitivities kind of heighten. But overall, if it's not accumulation of multiple things, then as an occupational therapist, I'm not really gonna be too worried about it. I mean, and as a mama, mother's intuition is like the number one thing. Nobody is calling my office because they want their child in therapy unnecessarily, So if you're calling and making the effort, then there's something really going on, and I take that very seriously when a mom's going to make the effort to seek out therapy for their child. So, any other questions?
My son's 3.5, and he eats by mouth, but he still doesn't eat solid food.
Okay.
He can chew because he'll chew on chewy tubes for hours on end if you let him. It just doesn't convert to food.
Okay.
He won't chew solid food. And so I don't know if that's a sensory thing or not.
So when I'm looking at a child that come to me for feeding issues, we're looking at multiple areas. We're looking at oral motor coordination. Sounds like he has good jaw strength. It could be a sensory lack of awareness, where when the food gets into his mouth, he's not sure where it is. So it's the safest thing to just get it out of his mouth. So either giving him options of food with increased sensory input, such like crunchy foods, something that maybe he can hold on to and he can chew on. So like a veggie stick is oftentimes something that we'll start with, because the saliva touches that, it disintegrates really easily, so not a huge choking hazard, but then the child is able to position it very strategically, or you can help strategically place it on the lateral borders of their mouth. They can take a bite, it's small enough for them to manage and swallow on their own. Foods that have a varying temperature, again, something that's cold or ice, that's going to provide rich sensory input. Adding extra cinnamon or spices to kind of increase the flavor of the food will help with awareness. But again, step back for a second and see how does your child handle full body sensory play, tactile play? Are they okay getting their hands messy? They okay digging in, getting messy whenever they're eating? If it's spaghetti, are they okay getting their hands full of sauce? If they're not, then that's probably more of like a sensory sensitivity, but I'm betting that it's potentially more of like lack of awareness. And then also finding a good speech therapist or a feeding therapist, someone that's really focused in on feeding, to really evaluate what's going on from an oral motor standpoint. Because we surely don't want to take it from a behavioral standpoint if there's something underlying that's really making it hard for him to feel safe whenever he's eating. So
he likes really deep pressure.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can, sometimes I think I'm going to hurt him because I squish his little feet, but he likes being squished.
Mm-hmm.
And the harder the better sometimes.
Absolutely.
So I don't know if he just doesn't feel stuff. in his
It,
mouth?
it definitely, it will, with kids, with any individual with low muscle tone, that's basically, we know that the brain is not properly or efficiently processing proprioceptive input. So engaging in intense full body, heavy work activities. We were talking with another mom earlier about offering opportunities for vibration experiences on the face and in the mouth. So Z-Vibes or other teething toys that they provide vibration to the mouth. That's going to increase awareness. That might be something that you would offer before mealtime to see if that would help kind of increase his awareness of what's going on in his mouth.
My daughter's 21 months old, and she occasionally does repetitive behaviors, like sitting in a high chair, she'll hit the back of her head repeatedly against the back of the chair. Or sometimes when she's sitting, she'll lean her neck back really far and just swing her arms like really fast from side to side, and you know, she likes that apparently. Our OT has told us strategies for like redirections, basically, to try to get her off of that. Are there any strategies you would recommend, or do you think that it's okay, or should we just let her express that, or is it a problem?
Well, with any, from a true sensory integrative standpoint, we really try to find an appropriate substitution. So, I mean, imagine something that you depend on every single day to keep you organized, and then we're like, nope, we're just going to take that from you, and then you're like, no, you're going to figure out something else to do. More than likely, you're going to find a substitute for it. So so you can absolutely redirect, and without any negative connotation where you would redirect to put her hands down and maybe give her something to fidget with, or, oh, it looks like you need to move your body, and remove her from where she's banging her head and find another. I mean, that would be like the detective work that you'd have to do. What would be is she seeking the actual movement of the rocking, or is she seeking heavy work of banging her head, to get that real intense input? So you may not find another movement where she's banging her head, but maybe jumping up and down would give her that same kind of input.
Ash does the same thing. He's 15 months old. He does the same chest banging and stuff like that, and arching all the way back.
And what activities is your child participating in whenever they're doing that? You said they're in their high chair for mealtime, or?
Yeah, I mean, in the car seat, and basically if you put her back against a wall. So anything where she gets that first input, and then she'll just
Keeps going.
Samantha does that. Like, she'll crawl over to the wall just so she can bang her head, and I think it doesn't hurt her. Like, she can't feel pain whether she's like causing herself harm.
Exactly.
I try to not for her not to do it, but she enjoys banging her head against the wall.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Someone's enjoying that same proprioceptive input right now.
So my OT was saying that she thinks it was just a seeking sensory, and it's just something he likes doing because he feels like he needs sensory.
Right.
So I kind of think maybe the proprioceptive exercises
Yes.
and doing that would help. So getting
Right.
to jump or to crawl or.
So, I mean, I'm supporting with what your OT's saying as far as redirecting, because we really, I mean, with our children with autism, I mean, if they're spinning around, oh, that's so cute when they're 2, but it's not cute when they're 8 and in their classroom or flapping their hands. I mean, we're looking for a substitution that's more appropriate. So that's fine and dandy maybe because they're not going to hurt themselves at 15 months. But if we don't find a more appropriate behavior, more than likely that'll be what they're doing at 3 and 5, and then have the strength to really hurt themselves. And it's not really what we want our kids doing in the classroom or when they're out in public around. So we want to support them in finding much more appropriate solutions.
What sort of solutions would you suggest then? So
Back to what we've talked about. Yes, I mean, when
When they can go back on that and rock.
okay.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying, like, just putting your detective hat on. I mean, we can give 100 solutions, but, you know, truly give something a good attempt. You'll notice right away if they enjoy it, but they might enjoy it today and not tomorrow, and then again the next day, you know. So the same with you and I. I mean, sometimes I want spearmint gum and sometimes I want bubble gum, you know. It's not that what your efforts are for naught. It's just that some days your child may not be as dysregulated as the next because of what happened the day before, you know? I mean, it really has a cumulative effect on a child as it does on our own bodies.
My question is about our insanely messy kids. And so, like, our daughter, like, because I walk in as an adult and I see something that makes me nuts. But is there any benefit to just letting their environment just be chaotic because it's a sensory experience for them? Or, I don't know, like, as far as, like, organization, heavy work, I understand making them clean up is useful. But is there anything just, like, having a place that's theirs that they can create chaos in that allows them comfort?
And again, you know your child, and if that is supportive of them in some way, a lot of times though it can continue to perpetuate some disorganization. Yeah. So if there's benefit to their creative juices flowing by them having free access to craft material or pillows and blankets to do all kind of creative, you know, pretend play, great. I think at the end of that activity though, it's a good lesson and a good opportunity to instill internal organization and rhythm to be like, okay, are you done making this beautiful creation? Yes, I am. Okay, well then mom or dad will help you clean it up. It's beneficial to us all to have a start and an end to an activity. It's very disorganized. Very disorganizing to us to have a whole bunch of undone things throughout our world. So, and there's just not a whole lot of opportunities for things to be left undone. Like once they get to school, there's not going to be a whole lot of teachers that are going to be like, okay, yes, you can leave your homework half done. Yes, you can leave your test half done. You can leave your books half packed. I mean, there's an end to an activity. And so we want to instill that from a pretty young age.
In regards to the unsafe behavior, like the head banging and things like that, I understand the positive redirection and getting their sensory input somewhere else, but do you say like, no, stop, that's like dangerous, like, or does that just bring more attention to the bad behavior and then they do it? Well, I just want to know when I'm supposed to say no to my child as opposed to just redirecting it positively.
Right. From a very strict behavioral standpoint, and I mean, I'm not a behavioralist, I leave that to my ABA colleagues, but the rule of thumb is to ignore, to extinct the behavior, except when it is causing, like, could cause severe harm to the child. So if they're throwing themselves back, then just blocking them without necessarily a verbal no, and redirecting to something more appropriate, and then saving the no's and the raising my voice when I see my child running across the street kind of thing, or running away from me when I get out the car and we're at the grocery store. Because again, kids who have lower muscle tone, they tend to have a decreased awareness of their body. They tend to have decreased awareness of pain. So they may seem more thrill seeker in nature because they fall off, they bump their head, they stub their toe, something falls on their foot, and it's just, they don't even feel it. So we could be spinning our wheels with no, and they're like, I don't get it, like this feels great, So really trying to limit and save those big corrections for when they could truly be hurt. But again, if it's something that is becoming a repetitive concern in your house, like discussing with a behavioralist would be my recommendation.
My daughter is 7, and we really struggle with tags of any sort in her clothing or seams. And we, essentially take off all the tags. And sometimes, she'll try something on and she'll say, it's
Right.
And it didn't bother her for 45 minutes before then. So a part of me feels like it is behavior. I know she has sensory issues, but then I do feel like she's bored and it's kind of a attention-seeking behavior. But once she's had a behavior in her clothes, that piece of clothing, it can never be worn again. It's
Right.
Like, okay, that she'll even say, give that to my friends.
Right, right.
So it's just very frustrating, and I don't know if there's anything I can do. Somebody had mentioned putting something tight on underneath, like a gymnastics leotard.
Yes.
Although then I worry that she will be picking at the seams, or at the, that it'll be pushing on her skin, and that will irritate her.
Right, right.
So I don't know what recommendations.
And when Jess and I work with kids though have those struggles, we are oftentimes working with someone who can give us support from a behavioral standpoint. So we're supporting their body and giving the parent lots of sensory diet activities that we know that they're getting fueled from that bottom up approach. But then we're working with a counselor or a behavioralist of some kind to have some sort of like positive reinforcement going on, like, oh good, you wore it for a minute, or we were able to go do something fun. Because I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, church can be a doozy for any kid who's not dealing with any kind of sensory issues,
We use behavioral tactics when that happens, right? Because we're not just going to leave.
Yes, yes.
So we use that, but we can't, get her to then, and I don't know if it really is,
It's both at that point. I mean, it's both. I mean, she's going to try everything she possibly can to get out of the situation. So maybe having a special bag with sensory-based activities or other distractions, that this is her bag only for church, or those special times when she's going to really be pushed to a limit where you can't do much besides just kind of have to barrel through, and then reward after for find some positive of what she did, so that there's a positive connotation and association with that experience, to hopefully prevent that negative mindset that I can't ever wear that adorable outfit again.
What do you do to help get past the sensory part of not being able to wear the shirt with the collar? It is part of your uniform that you have to wear. There's no choice.
So again, if you're gonna, you can do some sort of tight-fitting shirt underneath. So again, from a sensory perspective, lots of supportive work from the body, bottom up, and then practicing before, you know that this is going to be a challenge, this is new. I mean, anything that's new is always, going to potentially cause a challenge for any of us. So practicing before the school year begins with your uniform on, and start with short bursts of exposure, and then finally having a reward instantly for whatever, stickers or treasure boxes or whatever you want to come up with, and just putting some sort of positive association with it. So again, really using both approaches from a cognitive behavioral standpoint and sensory standpoint. And really the worst time to practice managing these behaviors and sensory, it's like, we can't ever go to the grocery store. It's like, well, let's see how we can, whatever your struggle is in the grocery store, it's going to be really, really hard to manage their behavior in the grocery store. So let's figure out what's the struggle in the grocery store. Is it sitting still? Is it staying in a confined area? Is it getting told no? And practice those things at home where you can easily practice the skill, and you're not dealing with a temper tantrum in the middle of the store or at a birthday party, because that's really the hardest place to train a child when you're out, in the community. Who wants to sit there and deal with a massive temper tantrum in front of your friends, family, or strangers? So don't expect magic to happen out there when you haven't practiced the skill maybe in the house, or in an environment where you can have a little bit more control.
Well, I talked to you earlier, but I also just wanted to pose this for everybody here. My son is 1 and has started teeth grinding. So you mentioned chewy tubes, so did you. I ordered those an hour ago. But I was just wondering if anyone else had, if any older kids had
all the same kinds of, yeah.
But there's different, like, densities, I guess. There's some that are better, some that are softer. There's some that are
Okay.
you know.
So I just keep spending $50 over and over again until I find the texture I like.
No, the ones that I showed you that were, that some were bumpy, I mean, you're on the right track with.
Just one
I mean,
thing,
we can shoot on anything.
the teeth grinding, what are your thoughts on a weighted blanket?
I mean, we like weighted blankets.
To help at night, because a lot of times the teeth grinding continues at night.
That's a good point. I haven't noticed it at
Because
night.
I'll go
but-
in, and my daughter still, you know, and we go to the dentist, her teeth are, you know, she's grinding them down.
So they can see, like they can tell
They
it's
can see.
happening.
But
Oh, yeah.
with her adult teeth, because they're stronger, we're not having as much of a problem, and she now has braces, and so, I mean,
Okay.
she's not where she, you know, so she's
But
not.
the weighted blanket at night help with that?
They have retainers that you can wear at night, so that they wipe it down. I mean, it's just another solution.
I wonder if she would wear one of those.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, see, we're still at compliance age, probably. So.
I mean,
so
she has
you
braces
still-
and stuff, but you just wear it at night, and it just is another
Yeah,
way.
it's kind of like, I mean, it's kind of like.
That happens outside, I mean, that's something that should but, yeah.
But we were told a weighted blanket helps.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's no one fit for every child, but back to what you were questioning, like a weighted blanket at night, I mean, that's a great opportunity to provide full body proprioceptive input in a passive way that could be really calming for their nervous system. So, yes.
I just experienced my eldest son. He's actually known Prader-Willi, and he has sensory processing disorder, and he's a sensory seeker. And we found the vests, so the compression vests, fabulous, but he won't tolerate a weighted blanket, for example. So, I mean, you just got to try stuff.
You do.
Some
There's
stuff
weighted
works,
belts that you can wear. Before parents go, I mean, because weighted, like therapy weighted things are really expensive. I mean, so I'll get parents to get like a men's tube sock and fill it with beans or rice to have some weight there, just to see how their child likes it. Because some kids feel claustrophobic, they don't want it on them, or sometimes you just have to be persistent and let them keep working through just so the novelty wears off of them to realize if this feels good. And then like Etsy or finding a grandparent, or if you sew, that can make, you know, a makeshift weighted blanket, because they can get pretty pricey, and I just, you know, it's a bummer if it doesn't work for your child.
I've seen them at Target and Sam's now.
Okay, awesome.
And
And Brookstone has one also. And I recommend parents flip through. You can get like Southpaw, go on their website. I mean, that's like the sensory integration magazine, Fun and Function. There is habilitations, and like just start flipping through and looking, and you're gonna be able to, just for your eyes to be open to like all the sensory equipment that's out there, and then you're gonna go to the dollar store and be like, oh my goodness, look, this is exactly what I saw and it's a fourth of the price. And so there's lots of ways to find. If it does not have therapy associated with it, it will be 50% less. And you can find some really good things for a fraction of the cost.
I think we have time for one more question before we wrap it up. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.